Welcome back to Meet Bridget. Kashia here. I'm the COO and co-host of the Meet Bridget podcast, and together with my best friend, partner, and Meet Bridget founder, Asha Gabriel, I help run a confidence and communication platform for teen girls called Meet Bridget. We are currently in our fourth season, which has been so incredible. We've been really lucky to host so many successful, articulate, diverse women who've all shared their individual pathways to success and who've gifted us and our audience with their vulnerability, transparency, and so many valuable lessons and takeaways. It's really been rewarding. I can truly say this about every season, but I think like now that we've really hit our stride more in season 4, it just feels so bright and wonderful and joyous and really like everything's coming together. I think Asha would agree. And now we're sitting here on camera recording together. We're doing a partner episode for the first time in a little bit. So we're really excited about that.
Hi.
Hi, Ashi. So this season, we've also launched a really beautiful new website showcasing everything we've accomplished in the last decade. Yes, you heard that right. Almost decade. And we've leaned really heavily into building out the coaching arm of our brand even further. We launched our first evergreen course back in May, so you can now take our Define Confidence course as a self-paced online class. Just head to meetbridget.com, check out that new website, check out our coaching page. And it's just been a really big year for us. I mean, we feel like we're just getting started. I think Ashi, you're over there nodding because it just feels like there's something new and inspiring, and there's so much more to do and so much more that we want to accomplish for our audience, for our teen girls and within our Meet Bridget community. But we'd really be remiss if we didn't pull back the curtain a little bit and, get vulnerable with all of you like we love doing, and just share how challenging it really actually is doing this in the context of managing careers, managing mommy life, managing family life. I mean, it's been a crazy one for us, and it just keeps building upon itself. So, welcome to our partner episode. Ashi, how has
Welcome.
it been going? Let's check in with each other.
Well, it's been wild. I feel like my life has been very, very busy. We're recording this. We are, well, summer is underway, but it's just, it's been a lot of, my family personally has like a lot of big events, birthdays, anniversaries, and travel that just always align in June. But then on top of that, kind of maintaining the normal schedule and stuff. So it's been a little crazy. But we've also had so much great momentum with Meet Bridget that, Kashia and I come back to this time and time again that for both of us, having these episodes go out every Wednesday and having new stories shared, it's a lifeline for both of us because knowing that constant, that's a thing that we're both invested in, that's important to both of us. It just, to me, really feels like a nice through line, even when a lot of my other schedules and demands are changing. For those of you who maybe you've just started listening to the episodes, you're on the podcast as a new listener, we've been so excited because we started this with a mission of creating a library of different pathways and career paths for young women to relate to. We have always had this thesis that when a young woman can relate to what another successful woman was like as a teenager, that they then can see themselves potentially in their shoes later in life. So our goal is that a young person could be listening to any one of these stories. They might hear something about when that woman was a teenager, some of these stories that are not really told about a lot of really successful women, and then realize, oh my gosh, would have thought that I could maybe pursue the career of a graphic designer or artist or doctor, but this woman who sounds just like me when she was, young, or I just really like who she is and I want to be like that person. That it could just open up more pathways and understandings of just the sheer multitude of paths, choices, and careers that can lead to what we define as success. So for our company, success is so aligned with really confidence, communication, and the feeling of just agency that mastering those things comes from.
Yeah.
Uh,
Agency and accountability.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And really just a sense of being the captain of your ship, even
Yeah.
though, and we, in our own personal stories, we can attest that we've had some unexpected, stormy waters and detours and things. We're not saying that it's like, you know, being successful is just having your plan and executing your plan and making all the
Yeah.
money and, like having everybody know you for being something. But it's really just a sense of like, okay, if life happens, I have the tools to manage this. Like
Yeah.
I've got me. I can take this on. I can figure it out. And we really think that that shows up for all of our guests that we've had on and will continue to have on for you guys. So we've just been so excited about this mission from day one. Really, that's why we've been building this library of stories. But it's also had these amazing side effects. Like I was told the other day, someone had listened to a podcast episode and it was one of their friends that was being interviewed. And they told me, like, it was so cool to listen to because we've been friends for a long time, but I had never heard of these stories from like her childhood. I had no idea. And Kashia and I feel this way too. Like a lot of our guests are people that we've known for a long time, but getting to sit down in this context and really put the spotlight on them and go deep and figure out like what fundamentally built the person that they are today is just such an honor. And it's so cool to hear those stories because it's obviously our podcast, our company, it has been built for young women primarily, but I think that people of all ages and stages can benefit from and have insight, you know, gained from these stories and the vulnerability that our guests have gifted us with. So that's my little soapbox but for now. But to get back to kind of like the real stuff, like this has been, I don't know why, it's mostly been like good stuff on my end, but there's also, just been, I've mentioned it in some of our like solo episodes and stuff before, but, in addition to the day in and day out of like managing this business and, we moved into a new home and just like all the normal scheduling stuff from running a family and everything, there's also, I've been managing a private family matter that is private because for the sake of the person it involves and just their own privacy. But managing that kind of is something that affects every day for me. So even when life gets busy in good ways and in fun ways, I've really had to return to like my toolbox, to figure out like how to not get completely burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a whopper of a year, and it feels crazy because it almost feels like you can say that about every year. It
Mm.
may I've done a lot of reflecting on this. It may be this time in our lives. Ashi and I are both moving into mid-30s. We're building our families. We're moving into homes. And our parents are also getting older. I just lost, both of my grandmothers in the last like 6 months. And these are all life things. They're all things that are meant to happen, right? When you think about not so much a cookie cutter life, right? But these are the significant events that we hope we get to enjoy as we get older, that we are getting older, we're healthy, we're building families, you get a house, your family members grow older. I feel very fortunate to have had both of my grandmothers in my life for so long. And yet, the day to day, the minutia of it, when you go microscopically into like what that actually feels like when you're helping your family member, it's consuming. And the process of somebody dying is actually, you know, even when it happens quickly, it's sort of a long process of, for me, it was getting hospice arranged and working really closely with like the doctors and the staff and advocating for my grandmother, who was very lucid up to the very last days of her life. And that can be very, very exhausting. And then the grief afterward and the way that you process these things. Grief, actually, just as an aside, obviously it's something that everybody who has lost somebody has dealt with. And that is something that you have to live through. But there's also like the grief of not having a normal day to day for a while, like Ash, in your case, when you're taking care of your loved one, or you're just even consumed by the thoughts of what if or how or what does this structure look like or how can I be of service here? There's a part I think you would agree where you're also grieving not having the normalcy or what we perceive the normalcy is. And it makes day-to-day things like functioning, like getting out of bed sometimes, like feeling motivated to get up and do something like work on your podcast or write a script or reach out to people. It makes it that much more difficult because it creates this layer or this fog that you're suddenly walking through. It's like I think about it as being in different seasons of your life where right now the world is still the world, but the weather just isn't as bright and sunny as it should be. Or maybe the sun comes out in patches and you remember what you're doing, but there is still that like fog kind of around you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really go away, you know, when you lose somebody. For me, and I've talked to some of my friends and family members that have lost loved ones. It's not like the missing goes away. It's not like the absence lifts and then life resumes and all of a sudden it's like, okay, you can take the band-aid off. It's fine. It's like, no, now you're walking through life with this new like beauty mark. Like you've got a new mole on you or you have a new like scar, you know, that you're walking around with. It's no longer detrimental. It's healed, but it takes a long time for that to heal and then the scar is always going to be there, just like the person that you lost. So it's been a challenging year. I think it life gets really, really busy when you get down into the microscopic details of it. And, you know, then you have work layered on top of that and responsibilities and just like that overwhelming desire that I know Asha and I both have, and so many other women have, where you want to be everywhere at once, doing everything you can at one time in the most organized way, in the best way, in the most productive way. For me, I need to be of service to the people around me, which some might call codependency, but I will make the argument that there is a level of codependency that I am happy living with because I need that love in my life and I need to reciprocate that love in order to feel like I'm living. You know, I think I'm a romantic in that way. But
Well, you're a person that thrives, really deeply thrives in connection that is like reciprocated connection, like really feeling like you are helping someone and that you're deriving meaning from that relationship also. And I don't think that's really unusual or a bad thing, you know.
yeah,
I was listening to you talk about grief and I've lost grandparents before and I think that it is so relatable, like what you're saying, that feeling of just like, oh, you don't want to just like put it away. You don't want to be like, "Ugh, I just want to be over this grief, like I'm over a breakup or something,"
yeah,
because it's like that's what makes it so hard to kind of work through because it's like you feel like if you were to just quote unquote deal with the grief, it's almost like you're just throwing away what that person meant to you. So it's almost part of you kind of wants to hold on to the grieving and how it's
hmm
affecting you because it feels like a way of honoring the magnitude of that person's meaning to your life, you know? So it's almost like a hard thing to even manage because it's like it being a big thing is like, well, it should be a big thing because this person is so important to
yeah,
me, you know? But then it's also like it can keep you from functioning, if you don't really have some sort of process to, just do something, start somewhere. I haven't lost someone for a long time, knock on wood, but, Kashia and I have talked about, for those of you who don't know, I breastfed my second born for almost 2 years. Was never intending to go that long, but it just was like a very peaceful, symbiotic relationship. And towards the end of it, it's, not definitely not very frequent at all. But I'm a person whose menstrual cycles do not happen while I'm breastfeeding, which was amazing. But then when I stopped breastfeeding, it came back. And prior to having kids, I have always struggled with like really, really intense cycles and PMDD, who feels like a person, which if you don't know what that is, it's I guess premenstrual depressive disorder. It's basically like it in addition to like real like PMS, like most women deal with to some extent. It's like the hormonal like heaviness of that, like the time just before and often sometimes like during my period is so pervasive and strong that it keeps me sometimes from it feels like grief in a way where it's like I
Yeah,
just can't
your serotonin,
function.
your
Like I'm seeing
neurotransmitters
everything. Yeah, like I'm
are
seeing
tied to your hormonal cycle.
exactly. Like there's a cloud over everything that I'm doing. Or I just also, it's interesting because it came back with a vengeance for for this recent cycle, and I realized that like there are certain things that like I know bring me joy when I get to work on them. One of those things is meet Bridget. Every time, and thank God for Kishia because it's nice to have like an accountability partner. It's like every time we get together and we work on this thing that's so important to us, I feel better no matter what, no matter how down I'm feeling. When we start, once we get going, I'm like, yes. It's the same thing
Yeah.
like going to the gym. It's like the hardest thing is getting in the door, right? You never regret. I've never regretted a workout. But it's funny because like when I have that hormonal fog, I almost feel like the hardest things for me to get to do are those things that fuel me. I almost feel like in that state, I feel like I don't deserve to do the things that I get so much value from, or that I don't have the energy to even start them because I don't feel like I'm in the zone. I'm not in the
Well, it's
place to
so
even like,
physically draining too
yeah,
because you're
yeah,
not just you're not just having an emotional response to something. Your actual hormonal and neurotransmitter balance is so off that, like your fight or flight response is like in constant flux because you're like trying to figure out, are you fighting? Are you flying? Are you fleeing or freezing? And so there's like all these physical manifestations of grief, of anxiety, of fear, of, you know, all of this that it like feels like you're in a sunken place, like almost like you're like lucid dreaming. You're like, okay,
yes,
everything's
like floating
happening, but
over
I
everything.
literally cannot get up.
I know. Well, and then it's like that compounds because then you have that like the self, just
Mm,
critique of like, like I have so much I need to do. Why am I just sitting here?
mhm.
And then that makes you feel even worse about yourself, about just like I'm just so lazy right now that I have so much to do. I should be moving 10, miles an hour, like just running around doing everything. And then you compound the like self-critique to whatever hormonally or anxiety or whatever grief, is like chemically affecting you, and it's just a recipe for disaster.
I don't mean to
So
laugh, by the way. I just feel like I realize you and I have two modes. One is sloth and one is like turbo. It's just so,
totally.
there's no, I mean, it really speaks to how much we love life. And this is why I think I'm a romantic. I think you are too, because everything has so much meaning.
Yeah. So
But it means
everything.
there's very rarely a middle ground where we're just like, meh, oh yeah, like let's just go along.
Well, I also feel like I'm a person that even on a good day tends to see interconnectedness in many things. I'm always, and I see this in my daughter too, which is so interesting. Like I'm always drawing comparisons in my mind between things. I like to ascribe significance to like even the small things, but it at its extreme, or if that's painted with that like kind of negative cloud, what happens to me is I sort of like I connect all the bad things and I see it almost as like a lawyer on the stand, like making a case for like why I suck.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen the entire period. There's usually one day where like I kind of and I can recognize it. Thankfully, I have a mom that has struggled with the same kind of things cyclically and, has been a nice sounding board for me where it's like if you get to the end of the like, okay, but why am I seeing things this way? Or why do I feel this way? Fundamentally, it's like you keep asking why and it's like if the answer gets to like, well, I don't know. you know, it's usually like hormonal for me, but it's like I'll connect all these like isolated events that just it's like, oh, I'm feeling tired or I'm bloated And then I was late for this thing because this thing happened with my kid. And then, oh, now it's raining today. And it's like all these random things get
Yeah.
like connected. And really they're not connected at all. It just kind of is um, one of those tendencies you can slip into when we're filtering the world and noticing more negative things.
PMDD really is the gift that keeps on giving too.
Gosh.
It's like a nice reminder that you're healthy in the sense that you have your cycle, but then you're like, man, the dark passenger's back. And I thought
Well,
if
it's
we
wild. I'm thinking about like you could probably even hear it in the podcast, like up to this point. Like when you would even talk like that entire period of breastfeeding, generally, I mean, it's very demanding on the body, but I felt like I was just like I wasn't as like passionate feeling generally. I was just like very like kind of chill, and like the oxytocin and stuff. And now I just kind of feel like, okay, like the passion is so great because it's like then I know like probably around like day 14 of my cycle, I'm gonna be like, yeah, I don't know.
No, I
Vibration.
think it's also relevant, the things that
Yeah.
you go through in the day to day as a woman, as a mom, as a human being who, is living life. Again, like loss is part of life. When you were talking, I was especially about your family member too, and about how you are honoring their agency, their privacy. I was remembering being in the thick of organizing hospice for both my grandmothers, actually, one in December and one this last month. And it gets very difficult because there's a part of you that wants to stay in that sunken place, because it feels like that's where you should be. Like you said, like it feels like the love that you have is so great. The person that you have to say goodbye to is a person that was so magnanimous in your life, so big in your life and in your world, that it seems so unfair to let go of the grief, because then that must mean that you're not honoring them. And one of the things that helped me so much during that process, part of it was compartmentalization, which can be a tool, but also like a silent killer. But one of the things that really helped me was constantly trying to like reverse the narrative, where I was like, yes, I'm really, really sad right now. I know I'm about to lose somebody. But what does my grandmother want? What are her wishes? Like, what is the person that I love? What makes them human and what are their desires? And how can we do this in the most dignified, respectful way possible all through the process? Like, from the initiation of hospice and like getting my grandma back home where she wanted to be, to, afterward to the memorial, and she wanted to be cremated, and she wanted her ashes spread. And there was even a point where my mom and I were like, well, should we keep some of them? Like people do that, to honor the family member, like in like an urn at home or whatever. And my dad was really quick to be like, my mom would have never wanted that. She wanted to be free. She wanted no one to have a place to go. She just wanted to be everywhere. And she really was like one of those women who was so incredibly smart that she lived well into her 90s. And at that point, her brain was just really outpacing her body and what her body could handle. I think about that a lot in a lot of different avenues, not just with grief, but like even in the day to day when you're thinking about like breastfeeding, for example. My son weaned himself at 11 months, and I was like you, Ashi, where I just thought I'll take this as long as he wants to. I mean, once he starts getting teeth, like maybe we'll
Yeah, like
we'll resituate this and
right.
refigure this out. But I want him to be able to have some sense of what's best for him. Just like when you're caring so much about your family member, one of the things I really admire is you're constantly thinking like, how do I respect this person's agency and protect them, not for me, but for them, for their future, like so that when they're ready, they can figure out how and if they want to tell their story or what their story even is. And I think that's so important and significant. And I think being able to empathize and just put yourself in the other person's shoes in any of these situations, whether it's like anxiety, grief, or like a situation that you're having to let go of, just trying to think about it from a different perspective and just shift it just a little bit, can really help create traction for moving again.
Totally. I think that's such a beautiful tool, really. And I hadn't really realized that that's a thing that you can translate to so many different situations. I was talking with, like, as you mentioned before, both of us are in a place where our parents are starting to get older. And, there's all those fears of like, oh my gosh, like I can't, like my parents can't get older. They can't get weaker. They can't get sick. Like, what am I going to do, when that happens? And,
I hate it. You want to
you know,
control so much.
you want to keep things exactly how they are. And I think
Yeah.
it's the same. You look at your kids and it's just like, oh, like I'm in this phase now where it's like my younger daughter just turned 2. I'm like, I don't have babies anymore. Like I have toddlers.
I know, and
And
Jude's
I and
right
I
behind her. I'm
y-
like, that's gonna
yeah.
happen.
And it's so funny because my husband is like, he's like, yeah, and they're awesome. This is so cool. It's even cooler now. And I'm like, you don't have any of that, like, oh, it hurt me. My heart is swollen. Like I
Yeah.
miss the chunky little thighs. And I think we both share a good amount of like nostalgia too. Like
We're
really
very
like to like soak
sentimental.
in a moment, and the beauty of the moment and the poetry of the moment and all those things. But what you were kind of talking about with that that moment of reflection where it's like, okay, let's take it away from just selfishly like a fear, that feeling of, oh, I don't want to lose my parent, my loved one, whoever. I don't want to lose them. I don't want to have to live without them. Taking that fear based, almost like selfish feeling and replacing it with like, okay, what would this person really want? And then also, I would add, like, if after this is over, this phase, maybe after I lose the person or 10 years down the line and we're in a different place or whatever, what will I be proud of and what will I regret? And I think that that's really helped me when taking care of other people's, but also like in a relationship, whether it's your permanent, like your life partner relationship, if you go that route, or if even just like, say you're a teenager and you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and, you're thinking about like, you're at a crossroads with that person and you're trying to kind of figure out what's right or what's wrong for you guys. I think even just saying like, okay, like what am I gonna regret later? Or what would I be proud of later, and kind of using that lens to dictate like what your next actions are. So like for example, I have a friend who when her parents passed away, she was the person that was there. Like
Mhm.
she was you know, helping them go to the bathroom and giving them showers and putting lotion on their feet. And like she was just there day in and day out. And she was like, it was so exhausting because she was also working, and doing to raising her own kids. But, and sometimes it was like not glamorous, like kind of weird to be like playing that role for her own parents. But she said at the end of the day, like, I don't regret a second of that care, and it's like it's hard while you're in it, but I just kept thinking, one day when they're gone, how will I see this period of time? And she just thought that, my parents during that moment, what they wanted for themselves was dignity and grace and whatever sense of like enjoyment that they could preserve in that last period of life. And I think about how you were so caring and patient and kind towards your grandmothers and also, you know, accommodating for your other family members. And it's like you look back at years from now when you think about that period of time, will you regret? What would you regret? And it's like you'll be proud of the fact, even though it's been so hard going through it and just like carrying the burden that you've been carrying, but then also really prioritizing what that person would have wanted. We talk a lot on this podcast about like choosing the things you're passionate about and going towards those things, which we always advocate when that's possible, but there are certain things in life where to get to the thing that's important to us, like sometimes the day to day is like dragging through the mud,
Mhm.
it's doing things that you don't want to be doing but just being consistent enough to get through something or build on something and keep something going. So,
Yeah. I think balance, like just keeping balance at top of mind too for those situations. I think about, the self-reflection as a tool and this time period in our lives, which has been difficult from so many different aspects and so demanding emotionally and physically from so many different aspects. And you're so right. There will be a point where I turn around and I look back and I say, wow, this is what I regret and this is what I'm really proud of. And I've done that in a lot of different situations in my life. And I hope, and I kind of know myself. So I know what will happen is I'll say, I really, really, really am proud of the advocacy portion of that. Like I'm so proud that I was able to be there for my grandmother, be there for my dad, who, I really wanted him to feel like he could grieve because he's not one of those people that wears his emotions on his sleeve. He's very tender-hearted, but he's very, very stoic. And what I had learned from my aunts, from my mom's mom passing away several months ago, was they had planned a lot of things because they had the time to do it. My mom's mom was sick for years before she passed away. So they really verbalized that they wanted to make plans ahead of time so that when she did go, they could all be very present and grieve. And I really took that in because I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. That the last thing you want to do when your family member passes away. And I translated this into a patient who I recently had to set up in hospice and he passed away really quickly. But I translated that lesson to that because it is such a gift to give yourself or to give your loved ones, like the preparation and then the time to grieve properly and to not worry about, okay, who do I have to call? What do I have to do? What bills do I have? There's so much at the end of life, just like there is in the day to day of life that needs to be done, like death and taxes, like it's going to come around for everyone. But when I reflect, I will look back and be like, oh, I'm really proud of myself for being that person. I think one of the things, and this is a consistent thread, then I will not necessarily regret, but I just have to acknowledge and be accountable for the fact that I'm not good at giving that same time to myself. And I think you're very similar in that regard, Asha, where you give so much to other people, especially our family members, that we often become a little bit of an afterthought. Like, even we had talked about the loss of my most recent pregnancy a little while ago on the podcast. And right now I'm in this space where it's very hard for me to access those feelings. It's really hard for me to acknowledge everything that my husband and I went through, my family went through last year with that. So I already know, like, looking back, I'm going to have to be like, okay, well, I have to be accountable for the fact that, like, that's something that I'm not good at, is giving myself that time and that space where, it goes back to like compartmentalization. It's a killer. It's a tool, but it's a killer. So I think that really leads into having the right tools at your disposal, especially for things like that. It part of that, and Meet Bridget is not so much a tool as it is an inspiration and a guiding force and a place for me to put all of the good things that I want and wish and hope for and extract all of the good things that we've built and created thus far. But I really want to get into the tools that we have to get us through these tough moments, to get us through the minutia of the day to day, and how we've been able to keep going and how we will keep going and keep building and creating outlets. And right before we jumped on, you were talking to me a little bit about this tool that you used with your parents that I
Yeah.
love and want to replicate over and over. I think you should definitely share it.
Yes. So, I mean, first off, I feel like, the thing you mentioned about compartmentalization, that it's like, it's useful. I think it is useful. Sometimes when you're just in that, like, especially if it's a time-bound issue, and like when someone passes, it's like people expect, like, what's the funeral? What's this? What's that? There's all these things that have deadlines and, urgency and other family members asking you. There's pressure, right? I think sometimes compartmentalization is essential to be able to even just function, right? But I think like we were saying with like having that space, even if it's like, okay, maybe right now, this month is crazy, but like starting next month, I'm gonna start seeing a therapist once a month. just to give myself a little space to make sure I'm feeling those feelings, or actually grieving, because sometimes like you need a little bit of facilitation to like to grieve, because otherwise it becomes like an afterthought. And just like we tell our little children, there's this whole wave of like more like positive, or sometimes they say gentle, but I like the word positive parenting, where it's like you telling your kid like you should feel your feeling, it's okay to feel that way. And once they've felt it and expressed it, all right, now here what are our tools to help ourselves? Like how can we move through it? Like what are our options? And giving them kind of just like that agency again, right? So anyways, I liked what you said about compartmentalization, but also that it's like it's not all a bad thing either. And it's not something to like criticize yourself for like, oh, I'm compartmentalizing again. It's like sometimes we just have to do that. But I think that finding that space for like, okay, and giving yourself a date or whatever it is, it's like I'm gonna start on Fridays, I'm going hiking, whatever it is, like scheduling time for yourself to
Yes.
just feel,
Giving
you
yourself
know,
that time to make a promise and keep that promise
to yourself.
to yourself.
Okay, well, I want to talk about this. So my parents were visiting for my daughter's birthday, and I love my parents so much. I've been blessed, and I say blessed because I did nothing to deserve them. I've been blessed with really amazing parents, and they love each other, and they retired at the same time. They're both successful eye doctors. But we were kind of talking about this period of retirement for them, and, like how they're filling their days and how they feel on a day-to-day basis. What like are the things that they're, where are they creating structure and stuff. And I don't know how we got on this topic, but I ran through this exercise with them that's loosely inspired by the work that I've done working with Angie Wisdom, who is a business and life coach that we've had on the podcast. So we'll link her episode in the show notes, if you want to listen to her episode. Great episode. But this exercise that kind of helps you distill like what should I be doing today and what I shouldn't be doing today. If you're in that stuck feeling, which Kishia and I have been feeling. It's so funny. It's almost like the more things that you have to do, the more stuck you can feel, like that analysis paralysis, right? So I was sitting with my parents, and like everyone else had gone to bed, and we ran through it with my mom, and I was like, get out a piece of paper. We're gonna write this down so you can look at it later. But what we ran through was a process by which you can distill your daily activities and understand which ones come from your values and which ones are kind of unnecessary. So what I had my mom do was I said, in this period of life, this like retirement, what are four main values? Like come up with what are your values? I won't share hers for privacy, but like what examples of what current values could be. Like for me right now, my family's health and wellness is like a big value, whether that's my children or my parents, my spouse, that's a big value. A separate value, I would say, would be your own personal health and wellness, which I do prioritize and have had to, particularly with like the cancer remission stuff and everything. Then you could put like, I'm not retired yet, so it could be like my career, and my mission in my career. And then you could have another one that maybe is just like another idea. Like for my parents, I think part of it was sort of both of them had a goal that was somewhat legacy oriented. That was different for each of them, but that was sort of a value of like your impact and leaving things behind. Another one could be travel, where it's like travel is a value of mine, seeing new places and experiencing new cultures, right? So there's so many different values you could have. And we can go deeper in this if you guys would like to. I think we should honestly probably run a course through like
Hmm.
identification of your values, and that those values can change. That's why I said like crucial, like this in this season of your life, for if you could only pick four, like pick four. And that could be different from what it looks like for you 5 years ago or even 1 year ago. So then we created those values, and then we went back up to the top and I said, for each value, I want you to create a time bound, specific, and measurable goal. And that you might even have a couple goals per value if, depending on which values are kind of the most urgent or important or need the most work right now. So we came up with goals that were, it's like, well, I want to have kind of, if I'm starting here and my end goal is to be here, this is how many times I need to do this thing per year or per month. For example, if travel was one of your values, then your goal could be I need to make a memory in a new place 4 times a year, or if it were like a health and wellness thing, it's like for me, I need to stay on top of my cancer remission stuff. Like it could be as simple as like I need to go to my doctor's appointments, every 2 months or whatever it looks like for me. So coming up with something, I like to use a year and then like zoom back in, like, okay, if I want this to be done by next year, what do I need to, what's the frequency of those check-ins that I need to do, down to the day or month or whatever that looks like for you. So, and we wrote it down. So you wrote down the goals for each one. And then we looked at those goals and said, okay, based on those goals, are there any things that you have to do every single day? Not every one of those goals will have an every single day thing, but there might be one or two where it's like, okay, if you had a health-based goal, maybe it was that you needed to have some sort of physical activity every single day, or that maybe you needed to have a little bit more like meal planning, or for the podcast, like I have to be, for Meet Bridget, to have it be moving in the way that I feel proud of, there has to be something I'm accomplishing with regards to the podcast every day. So writing that down, but then also kind of wrapping up the exercise by saying it when you're looking at all the things you feel like you have to do today, looking at them and then looking at your list of your values and your goals. And if that thing that you have to do has nothing to do with any of your core values during this time, the likelihood is that that thing is something that you don't need to make a non-negotiable. I understand there's like urgencies, like, okay, here, house caught on fire and you need to,
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay. There are moments that like maybe that means that you need to change your values for this period of time, right? But generally where it's like if you're feeling like you just don't have enough time in the day, and on the flip side, like if there is something where it's like, oh, like I really don't want to, like for us, I love interviewing. Scheduling is something that sometimes can be a little tricky, figuring out like how am I going to get like the interviews in, coordinating with the guests, also filtered through my family's calendar and just all of the other things going on in our life. Like scheduling is not super fun to me, but it's like if I were to look back and say like, well, one of my values is to have a consistent, community that's accessible to people. Scheduling is something I have to do to make that happen, right? And then kind of once you tie it back to your value, it doesn't become so much like, I don't want to do it. It's like, well, I have to do this. If I want my values to move forward and be protected with what's important to me, then this is just part of making my values stronger. And it kind of it gives, like we talk a lot about mindset. It kind of gives you a change in that mindset where it's like, this isn't just something I have to do, or it's on my list, or it's like a thing I need to do. It's like, oh, that one I should highlight because that's a value-based task for the day. And it's going to feed the person I am and what's important to me.
Yeah.
So
You get to
it was fun because we like ran that through with my mom and wrote it all down. And then I was like, Dad, do you want to do it too? And at first he almost like walked away. And then it was so cool because my mom was like, you should do it, because we can look at ours together. And I think it's so neat to do that exercise with someone else because you can kind of keep each other accountable, you know. And we ended up going through it for him too. And it was so fun for me to even kind of hear from my parents like what their core values were right now. And I think that helps me help them too.
Mhm.
So, but it was funny because she and I were talking I shared that I did this with them. And I was like, "Ooh, when was the last time I did this for myself?"
I know.
Like, and we think about our values all the time. It's who we are, but like to write it down
To
and like
articulate
say,
it in that way.
articulate it, give yourself that measurable time-bound goals associated with your values, that which is basically the insurance saying that like these are this result or this time-bound measurable goal is the way that I'm ensuring that I am protecting that value.
Yeah.
It's a way of measuring your progress towards that value. So we don't always do that explicitly, and it's so important and can really be a tool to look at maybe what you should be doing in a better light, and then also looking at like maybe what you could say no to,
Yeah.
which is really just saying yes to space for yourself, that balance we were talking about, or saying yes to other things that, might show up for you to protect those values that you maybe didn't even realize.
Yeah. I was so impressed by this exercise, which it's no surprise that Angie Wisdom had a hand in that, because she's so brilliant when it comes to really directing your attention to the things that matter. But this idea of distilling your non-negotiables based on your values, I think is invaluable. I think one of the things too that is very meaningful for both of us, and it's so interesting the way that you worded it, that we don't articulate it often enough, that we don't do that often enough for ourselves. I think you're right. And I think so many people think about things really deeply. I mean, humans are quite complex and everybody has these different thought processes and, you know, algorithms in their own brain of how they view the world and perceive the world. And I think sometimes we forget that a really valuable part of self reflection is actually getting what's going on inside out. And I think that's why you and I really enjoy creating tools, not just for ourselves, but for other people, because we see the effect that it can have when you journal, when you have a conversation with somebody that you trust and who's a safe space. You and I could be going through absolute hell and like be in the trenches, but I always feel like when we connect, it allows us to have a sounding board similar to having a really great therapist, that you can talk to and just even verbalize what you're thinking. And even though in my head, and I do believe this, I think I'm a logical thinker. I think you're very logical. Sometimes, like, I'll say things to you, and you're like, yeah, but like, what if you think about it in this way? And me being a very logical thinker, my mind is like blown because I'm like, wow, I
Yeah.
never thought about it. I never realized that there's this whole other vantage point because in my head, I'm so used to being right in my world that sometimes I forget I'm not right all the time or that there's multiple ways to think about something. And so,
Yeah.
let's not forget that the power of self-reflection also means like pulling it out of yourself in some way, whether it's a conversation or having a
Totally.
creative outlet or giving
I mean,
yourself the luxury of time, like you said, scheduling the time if that's what it takes. So it's super valuable.
well, I think it could also be, like seeking that time to have reflections. It's like you might get an insight from yourself or from a close friend that you didn't know before. It can also be that like something that you assume that you're confused on or you haven't figured out yet. Sometimes when you write it down or if you share it with someone and maybe they like try to give you a solution that's you're like, oh wait, no, but that wouldn't be right. Like sometimes it makes you realize like, oh, I actually already have kind of figured this out quite a bit. Or I actually do. This is actually a very clear value
Hmm.
for me that I
Hmm.
I thought I had no idea what my values were. Like, oh, actually, like, no, that thing is actually really important to me. Just like it can be affirming rather than just being like a way to figure things out. It can also like make you know that you already do know.
Yeah.
You already have like a sense or maybe something that seems very complicated in your mind is actually um quite simple when you put it into words and distill it down a little bit. So I think those exercises and really like writing something down or getting it out of your head, at least in a conversation with a friend, or a loved one that you trust, I think, or a therapist, so helpful. And you have to schedule the time to make it happen. Like we stayed up late that night to have this conversation. And I think I was getting up early and, it was past midnight. We were sitting in the kitchen, like going through this, but I was like, this is valuable time, like I'll get my sleep back, but like this is productive time because it saves hours of confusion and, um, you know, decision making paralysis down the road. So,
Yeah, sometimes we have to
yeah,
be
that's a fun
flexible.
little like exercise and but then also just kind of the grace to like because she has said like make time for yourself to process and it looks different for different people too. I think like we've talked about both of us really get a lot from like moving our bodies because she is very much like an artistic and really I mean it helps that she's like incredibly talented in her
That's not where I
art.
thought this was going, but thank you.
No, but like you get so much out of spending time making things, whether that's writing or creating a beautiful floral arrangement or cooking something with love or trying something new with your hands, just like you build things and create things and you get so much out of that time.
Yeah,
I think it's a way that you process a lot of your thoughts and emotions into the things that you
it's such a good point actually
create.
because I like that you're reminding me that normally I love moving my body because the last month, and I thought about this the other day, I am one of those people that keeps a meticulous planner usually, and my planner is my journal, and it's where I transcribe everything I would like to do, like all my goals and aspirations, my lists, my plans, my workouts, my medication schedules, but like the workouts have always consistently for years and years and years. I always get the same moleskin journal, and at least 4 to 5 times a week, I have a highlight workout that I accomplished, and I don't highlight it until I've done it. And so I could look back over the last 5 years and tell you how many workouts I did when I did them, if for no other reason than to keep myself accountable over the years. And because it is such a big part of my life and moving my body normally is something I need to do. And that hasn't changed. But what's interesting about this particular period in my life is I haven't exercised really in like probably a month and a half. And I was thinking about it going into this weekend because things are slowly starting to shift back into whatever normal is, it's starting to shift back into a day to day. And I thought about it and I was like, I don't really feel like working out this week and I don't feel like moving my body, but I do feel like sketching and painting and planting things. And I made a bunch of pies yesterday for a friend's birthday. And there I appreciate you putting that together for me because I realize I was kind of beating myself up like, oh, you really haven't worked out. You haven't done what you normally do. You haven't been moving your body. But I realize when you were verbalizing that I have been giving myself space. It just looks different right now. And that's okay because I've
It is
gotten a lot out
okay.
of
And
that.
I also think that, while sometimes exercise can be a way to sort of like help us snap into a state, give us some endorphins and stuff, sometimes our bodies are depleted and that like emotional things that we are enduring, or hormonal things for that matter, can really deplete our bodies. And you get into a state where it's like, this actually happened to me last week, like when I had first started my cycle, and it was just freaking horrible. It was horrible. And it was day 2 and I was scheduled to do a workout and I gave my session to my husband. I ended up like I was like, no, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. It's gonna help me. It's gonna help me feel better. And I just at this point, like that morning, I was like, I'm gonna be so worried about what I'm freaking wearing. And like I don't even I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I'm bloated and cramping and like, yeah, I could go for a walk later, but like this kind of workout is not gonna
Sometimes your
it's
body
gonna
needs
create more
rest.
stress,
Mm.
and, like, my body's working really hard, like, it's completely transforming into a different hormonal state right now, and I felt proud of myself in that moment because I was just like, "Yeah, this isn't right for me today."
Yeah.
And it's like, it's okay, like, I'm a person that same way, like, I really like to, like it's one of those things where it's like that book that's like, "Make your bed when you wake up in the morning," like, it feels like once I get my workout in, I've got my endorphins, I've checked something off, I've, like, I've take even if that's the only thing that I get to do that's taking care of myself in that day, I did something to take care of myself in the day, which feels like a better foundation than the
Yeah.
alternative, right? But that day I was just like, "You know what? My body's tired." Like, I'd be better off giving myself just time to lay down
Yeah.
and, like, do whatever kind of feels good, use a hot water bottle or whatever. Um, and I think that it's just, like, that's a level of body like, we tell ourselves, like, "Oh, you should do this, this, and this on this schedule every single day," but I think also just, like, listening to your body and knowing when, like, what kind of work out or work in, will feel good
Mhm.
and, like, really feed you and help you. It's not like, "Oh, I don't feel like working out, so I'm gonna, like, stare at TV all day and just lay here and,
Yeah.
turn off my emotions," but, like, okay, well, if that's not right for me, what's another way I can take
How
care of
else do
myself
you
today? And
channel
maybe
it?
that looks like,
Mhm.
yeah, sketching, and that regulation of your nervous system and stuff that comes from creating and sketching and just holding your child or whatever it is, or going on a walk with a friend,
Yes.
that is all beneficial just like a workout would be.
Yeah.
Um,
Lots of walks lately, actually. They've
yeah.
been so
Well, there
nice.
you go. That counts.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like the most underrated, um, and just purely beneficial form of it is a form of
Which
exercise.
it's also very sweet because we haven't been using the stroller for my son. We use this backpack which
Oh,
has like a little leash attached to it because he likes to be free and run around. But I need to feel like he's not going to run into the street.
yeah.
And it's so funny because now, like, my husband will put the dog harness on the dog, and Jude will grab his backpack and like hold the leash up to it. I'm like, yes, we can go for a walk. It's
Cute.
so
I
cute.
love him.
Um, but I
Yeah.
I just you articulated it so beautifully, Osh, and I do want to kind of like quickly circle back to one thing you said that really ties this in. You said that the word no sometimes is necessary, and I really think that what we've been talking about here is, our norm, or what we see our norm for you and I is that we are, that turbo mode. So either turbo or sloth. But in reality, I think it's we really value being accountable to ourselves, and we really value keeping those promises to ourselves that we often talk about. That is a form of developing self-confidence and creating this foundation of self-confidence where we are self-assured that we can accomplish things. And that really serves us well pretty much all of the time. But I think that remembering that the word no is still a necessary part of being accountable to yourself, that it's not necessarily saying no to an opportunity or closing the door on something, which is something I used to be really scared of. I have like the worst FOMO ever because I'm like, I want to be in all these places and experience all these things and learn all the things, read all the books, but you can't physically do that. And, there somebody had like posted this really cool graphic of like a bunch of like circles, and it was like all the circles were halfway filled up, and it was like when you want to do all the things. And then there was another image of all the same circles, but this time just one circle was filled completely up. And you could see the idea of, yeah, you can spread yourself amongst all these little things. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but to really achieve or accomplish or fill something up completely, you really have to put your energy into one thing at a time. And sometimes that means saying no to all of the other bubbles, all the other little circles, in order to refocus on the one that you would like to fill up, that cup you want to fill up. And so you said something about not just shutting things down, but really holding space for other things, allowing space for other things to come into your life. Um, a recent guest, Lauren Plunk, actually talked about a version of this where you're not just saying no or giving up on something, it's allowing yourself to pivot quickly. And those are all different ways where no can really serve you so well, especially when you're paralyzed or when you're feeling overwhelmed, or if you're like me and you have to tell yourself, no, I don't really want to exercise right now. That wouldn't feel good or healing or soothing. So let's try going for a walk instead, or paint with my son instead until he dumps all the watercolors on the carpet.
Exactly. Well, I think that this has been such a fun talk. I mean, I obviously always we have a lot of offline calls and talks that are so meaningful, but it's fun to kind of like take you guys behind the scenes a little bit with us and our friendship and um, how we kind of use this time to process together and reflect and integrate. Especially when things are just like it's funny because like she and I feel like we generally go through seasons like this at the same time. Like it's like our ebbs and flows are just like really aligned for some reason. Gift, but it's like usually like when she's having a hard time with something, I'm like, we just have a lot of compassion for each other because we are, I don't know, we get it, and we get each other, and we know fundamentally that like the intentions are there with each other and with our mission, and that we know it will also find a way to just like keep things going
Yeah.
and carry the team and figure things out. So yeah, so if you listen to this and you're, thinking about some things in your own life, or you want to work with us more, you can book us for a discovery call. We could walk you through that values exercise if you'd like, or even just kind of hear what you're, um, trying to figure out right now, and how, we could figure out a plan of how coaching might work well for you to manage that. Obviously, if you're a teen girl, but even if you're, a member at a different age or stage in our community, we'll work with anyone, if we feel that we can put our tools to use for you. If like therapy or something else is a better option, we'll also redirect you. But we are coaching and working with people on a completely customizable basis. Same thing goes for like if you have a team or a social group or group of people that would like to run through one of these exercises with us live or virtually, we do that too. And lastly, if you're just like, I don't know where to start, I don't even feel like going through and identifying my values. I'm just like, ugh, I can't figure out my confidence. I can't figure out where I should start. We have our Define Confidence course is now available on a streaming basis. You just go to meetbridget.com and go to, um, I think is it the coaching tab, like
Mhm.
the courses?
Mhm.
And you can sign up there. It is affordable. There are 5 sessions. You can take them all on one day if you want. You can spread them out and really soak it in for a whole month. But it's an amazing start to really distill, what is important to you, how you view yourself, how you viewed yourself in the past, and really where to go from here. So check out those resources. We've worked so hard on them, and really we have built them based on the knowledge, insights, and vulnerability that our guests have shared with us in the past 100 plus episodes. So
And that we've
check
shared with
out
each
those
other.
things. Yes, totally. I mean, knowing each other for more than 10
Yeah.
years now,
Asha's
and
my
just
if I want to burn it all down and then we talk, I'm like, "Oh, okay. This is why I this is why I love life."
like life.
I do like people.
I know. I know. I hope Kishia's ready for me to be back on my hormonal roller
It's
coaster.
okay. We'll do it
Like,
together.
she's my person where I'm also like, I have so much enthusiasm. I just want to share it. And she's like, that's amazing. Like, well, how can we turn this into something like manageable? She's like, wow, you're a lot. Like, let's write it down and figure it out. But also, that like dark cloud, dark passenger, like, oh, I ruined everything and I'm not doing enough. And she's just, I mean, God, what were we talking about? I think it was like when I was deciding, I was like, should I stop breastfeeding this week or should I stop breastfeeding the week after? Am I going to hurt her? And then literally, because she had just listened for a moment and then she's like, or you could just kind of like take the pressure off yourself and just like kind of let it happen when it feels right for both of you. And I was like, I could do that. Beautiful.
See,
I'm
it's
like,
that whole thing, having a
oh,
sounding board, because
yes,
these novel ideas are out there outside of your
yeah,
own head.
yes. So, as you might see, you have a variety of different perspectives, even between the two of us, which is why we're so excited to bring, our coaching to more people and more groups. So, reach out to us. And as always, head back here next week. Next Wednesday, you'll have another episode up and more stories to learn from, to relate to. So, thank you for being here. Thanks for hanging with us for some girl time and some vulnerability. We're grateful for you, and we'll see you next
See
time.
you next time.